Thanks for joining us on Wellness Talk Radio. I'm Chris Costello, and today we are talking with J.Schopick. J.Schopick is an author and patient advocate, also a PR consultant. In October of 1990, when her husband, Tim Fisher, was diagnosed with a brain tumor, her life changed dramatically. Julia then became Tim's medical health advocate, and for the next 15 years until his passing in 2005, Julia's first commitment was to helping her husband survive the medical system. With her help, he lived 12 years beyond his doctor's predictions. Julia credits Tim's increased survival and quality of life, at least in part, to the fact that she found several treatments for him that his doctors didn't know about, treatments most doctors call anecdotal. She decided after that one of her missions in life would be to tell other patients about treatments like these, which she calls patient evidence-based medicine. A year after Tim's passing, Julia created her award-winning website, Honest Medicine. You can find that at honestmedicine.com. It is to help educate people with the healthcare system and its many dysfunctions, but also to tell them about treatments like the patient evidence-based treatments she found for Tim. Julia now has a book, and it talks about these 4 incredible patient evidence-based treatments, and we're going to be discussing that with her today. We're so glad you could join us on Wellness Talk Radio, and thank you, Julia, for being here today.
I am so glad to be with you, Chris. I admire your interviews so much.
Well, thank you. And you have, through your research and your hard work and your life experience, you have discovered some amazing treatments to help people with all sorts of different chronic illnesses and cancers. You know, how this all came about from your experience, though, going through cancer with your husband, Tim.
My husband was diagnosed, as you said, in 1990 with a huge astrocytoma. By the way, that's a very serious cancerous tumor, brain tumor. And for the first 5 years, actually, we did exactly what the doctor said and did not do anything terribly holistic or terribly different. And then I began to see that he was having terrific side effects from a lot of the medications, and he, of course, had things going wrong, like his skin breaking down and all of that. So I decided I better start doing some research, and I did. And that kind of got us through until 2001. I'm going very quickly, Chris, because he did have a radiation-caused stroke in the middle of there, several seizures, several side effects of the treatment.
So for his brain tumor, he had chemotherapy and he had multiple surgeries?
Well, that's very interesting. No, he had chemotherapy, he had radiation, and this is something very interesting about brain tumor patients. A lot of times, the patients will have things like skin not healing. Hydrocephalus is a big thing, water on the brain. And he had all of those. When I was writing my book, I was talking about that he had just about every complication you could have. So this was a problem in that he had, by the time we got to the point which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, where I found this life-saving treatment for him, he had already had multiple surgeries not connected with brain tumor. The first one was a brain tumor surgery. The others were to repair things that had gone wrong.
And so the real damage came, I know on honestmedicine.com you talk about this experience you went through with your husband's brain cancer, and the real difficulties sounds like came from when the surgeries where the wound wouldn't heal.
Yes.
Okay.
As I had said many times, he had trouble with the skin not healing in the very beginning. And this often happens, by the way. Radiation is a killer to the skin. It's a burn. And often people who have had radiation have terrible skin healing problems. So he had the surgery in 1990. He had the radiation, and that, of course, made his skin fragile. He had shunts put in. I'm going to give a link for your listeners to the whole story of all the different things that went wrong. But in any case, he did not have a recurrence of the actual tumor until 2001 in all these years. And the doctor assured me that it would be an easy surgery. So Tim went in, and then, guess what? Didn't heal. His skin would not heal for 8 months.
Oh, my goodness.
After 8 months, you have to picture this. What the doctors were doing was the standard of care. The standard of care in a situation like this, with a non-healing wound, head wound, or any kind of wound, is to keep operating. I know this sounds silly because it really does, but to keep opening it up and trying to find two pieces of skin that will hold together. And his skin, as you can imagine, with a head got so fragile that they even went and took pieces of skin from other parts of his body. He had walked into the surgery in 2001, absolutely terrific. He had walked in, he was joking, he was with it. By the time he had had 8 more surgeries to try to close the wound, this was in 2001 and 2, he was severely disabled.
Oh, my goodness. 8 surgeries in a year?
8 surgeries in just a few months.
Oh, my goodness.
The craniotomy, the brain tumor surgery, and then it was at least 8 to try to get him to close. Meanwhile, I was doing all of this research. I put together 200 pages and put them on a disc, on a CD, and it was of all this stuff about wound healing, because I said to myself, this is a wound. Neurosurgeons are closing it up as a neurosurgeon would. You know, the only way they know to do is to keep operating.
Right.
So I had found all this stuff. They promised me they would read it. They didn't read it, I later found out. They just thought they were humoring this little wifey here. And then finally, it was one of these coincidences. Bernie Siegel, who was actually a friend of mine, he is a wonderful supporter, you know, the author of Love, Medicine, and Miracles.
Yes,
We were talking on the phone. He said, you know, Julia, there are no coincidences, just God incidences. And this was a God incident in the name of Dr. Carlos Reynes. He is an Oak Park, Illinois doctor, and I was working with him for a client, actually. And he said, how's your husband doing? And I just broke down. And said, he's not healing. He's not healing. He said, have you ever heard of Silverlawn? I said, what? Silver who? And he told me about this FDA-approved. It's not a cream. It's not a drug. It's really a different kind of healing system, which is pieces of cloth that have silver ions in them. And you put it on the person's whatever part of the body. In Dr. Reynes' case, he had used it for diabetic wounds. I was later to research a good deal about it. It's also used very successfully for burn cases. You put it way over the wound itself, and it does some kind of magic, which is explained in the article that I will give a link for. And the doctor at the hospital was agreed to let us put it on. I don't know whether you know how unusual that is. For you to bring something into the hospital that isn't normally there.
Right. Pretty unusual.
It is.
Yeah.
But this doctor, he had run out of tricks. So he allowed us to put it on TimPad. The day that it was put on TimPad was the last day he leaked. He started healing right away.
Wow.
I was over the moon. Yes, my husband was severely brain injured. Yes, he was incontinent. Yes, he was almost paralyzed, but he was still my husband.
Oh, my goodness.
And what amazed me, this is kind of a long intro, but what amazed me, Chris, is that none of the doctors were at all curious about what this was that had done it.
That is amazing. You would think with such a dramatic response that they would have some curiosity.